Across the Invincible universe, countless characters fight to protect the people they love, to prove their superiority, or to push their own ideals. But there is one who fights for none of that. There is one who fights only to bring about his own end, and to earn that end, he needs an equal, a being strong enough to finally kill him. This is Battlebeast. His real name is Thokk, and he's a leonine, a warrior race built for war. He was born on a planet locked in permanent, unending civil conflict. From the moment he could grip a weapon, he was in the trenches, and being a leonine gave him a head start. Heightened senses honed for the battlefield. His vision cuts through near total darkness. His hearing is so sensitive, he can register the faintest shifts in acoustic pressure, telling apart sounds as close as a tenth of a tone from 4 to 5 times farther away than any human could hear. His sense of smell is 14 times stronger than ours, and his whiskers can detect the smallest disturbance in the air around him, a kind of omnidirectional early warning system that lets him sense a threat before he even sees it. But senses alone don't explain Thokk. From spawn, there was something else in him, an insatiable, bottomless rage that other leonines simply didn't have. As a child, he trained obsessively, and by adulthood, he'd achieved something close to perfect mastery of every known weapon and combat style. And whether this was a natural mutation or a magical curse laid on him and his bloodline, the result was the same: unlimited endurance, near invulnerability, and monstrous, escalating strength. He put all of it to use. One by one, Thokk ended every conflict on his planet, defeating anyone who stood against him, until he had single-handedly dragged his entire world out of endless war and into an unprecedented golden age. To his people, he wasn't just a hero. He became a legend, an immortal warrior spoken of for generations, a living myth even among his own kind. And that should have been the end of the story. A savior who built a utopia. Except the rage that had won that utopia never actually went away. It didn't fade with the wars. It kept growing, feeding on itself, until Thokk realized the horrifying truth. The very gift that had saved his planet had become the one thing that could destroy it. With no more wars left to fight and this violence with nowhere to go, he knew that if he stayed, he would eventually turn on the world he'd saved. So he left, alone, by choice, for the good of everyone he'd ever protected. From there, Thokk set out across the galaxy in search of the one thing he actually wanted, an opponent who could kill him. Because by now, death wasn't a fear. It was the only peace he could imagine. And galaxy after galaxy, world after world, he could not find it. He carved a bloody path across the cosmos, conquering entire empires and taking the heads of fallen champions as trophies, until entire star systems trembled just at the sound of his name. He earned a title that followed him everywhere he went, the Scourge of Twin Galaxies. By then, he'd killed and conquered so much for so long that when someone finally asked him how he'd earned that name, all he could say was that he didn't remember. Eventually, word reached him of a planet that might finally offer a real fight. Earth, home to the Guardians of the Globe, and more importantly, Omni-Man. Thokk made the trip, but when he arrived, the Guardians were already down, and Omni-Man was nowhere to be found. Instead, a small-time crime lord named Machine Head offered him a deal: work as his bodyguard, and Machine Head would deliver him a real challenge. That challenge came in the form of Invincible and Titan, who stormed Machine Head's base expecting a routine villain bust. Instead, they walked straight into a universal tier threat. Battlebeast dismantled them both, effortlessly. He didn't even consider Mark's strength a real obstacle, just noting flatly that whatever the kid could do on Earth meant nothing against something that wasn't from Earth. When the new Guardians of the Globe showed up, Black Samson and Bulletproof lasted about 3 panels. Battlebeast beat both of them badly enough to put them in the hospital for weeks. Black Samson stayed in a coma even longer than that, and then spared their lives anyway, because killing them, he said, would prove nothing. They weren't even worth the effort of finishing. Unimpressed and bored, Battlebeast decided Earth wasn't worth his time and left through a portal to keep searching elsewhere. Sometime later, he found himself imprisoned aboard a Viltrumite vessel. And it's worth noting that imprisoned is doing a lot of work here, since a being of his strength was almost certainly capable of walking away whenever he wanted. He simply hadn't found a reason to yet. As it happened, Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, was being held on the same ship, and Alan the alien arrived to break him out. In the process, Alan also freed Battlebeast and made him an offer: help the Coalition, and Alan would help him find the opponent he'd been chasing his whole life. Thokk agreed, but made it clear up front: he could not be commanded. Then someone said the word Viltrumite in front of him, and any pretense of patience vanished. He'd heard the legends. He knew exactly what kind of power the name represented, and he wanted it immediately. He tore into the nearest Viltrumite on sight, and when Alan blew a hole in the ship's hull to try to control the chaos, Battlebeast and his opponent were launched straight out into the vacuum of space. It didn't slow him down for a second. He kept fighting and kept winning until the Viltrumite was dead. Unfortunately, this one wasn't the opponent he was looking for either. And because Battlebeast can't fly, he was left drifting, frozen solid in open space for months, until a coalition search party eventually found him. Even frozen, even stranded, the first thing out of his mouth was a request for more. It helped that a fellow leonine named Mook was already serving as an ambassador for the coalition, and it's likely Mook was the one who convinced Thokk to formally stay on and fight alongside them. He agreed, and the timing worked out. The Viltrumite War was coming. When the Viltrumites launched their assault, Battlebeast was, in his element, an absolute nightmare. He fought Thula and 4 other Viltrumites at once in open space, taking almost no damage despite being wildly outnumbered, and at one point, he literally grabbed Thula and used her as a weapon against the others. He couldn't fly, so instead he used the total absence of gravity to fling himself across the battlefield like a meteor, closing distance on enemies that should have been able to simply avoid him. It's a fight that, by every reasonable measure, Nolan alone wouldn't have been able to survive, and Battlebeast came through it barely scratched. Then Nolan, Mark, Thetis, and Space Racer combined their attacks and destroyed the entire planet Viltrum. The shockwave was enough to knock Battlebeast out cold, but only briefly. When he came to, he immediately locked eyes with Grand Regent Thraag and charged. It was finally the fight he'd wanted his whole life. It lasted about as long as it takes to read this sentence. Thraag, a being who at that point was casually fighting both Invincible and Omni-Man simultaneously, caught Battlebeast with a single swipe and sent him flying, dismissing him as barely a nuisance. Not an execution, not even really a fight, just a correction. It was the first real reality check Battlebeast had ever received, and it left him alive on purpose, which, for a man chasing death, was somehow worse than losing. But it also gave him something he'd never had before, a name. He now knew exactly who could give him the ending he wanted. For a while afterward, he went back to standard coalition work, dropping onto conquered planets, taking out warlords and their strongest champions, and liberating world after world into the coalition's fold. After clearing one shark-like species from its own oppressors, a woman from that same race asked to become his mate. He agreed. Then, Alan called him back to Coalition headquarters. Alan had taken over leadership after Thetis, the Coalition's former leader and secretly a Viltrumite himself, was killed by Thraag. Battlebeast, annoyed at being pulled away from his new mate for a meeting, was ready to leave until Alan laid out the situation. Thraag, now exiled from Viltrum, needed to breathe periodically, which meant he could be tracked and cornered. Alan's offer was simple. Hunt him down. Kill him. Battlebeast didn't hesitate. On the way to Thragg's location on the planet Thraxa, he made time to be with his mate one more time before Space Racer confirmed the target and delivered him a warhammer and greatsword to fight with. When he arrived, Thraag wasn't interested. As far as he was concerned, he'd already beaten this leonine once and settled the matter. Battlebeast disagreed. Their fight had never actually finished, and both of them were still alive, which meant the score wasn't settled. He wasn't looking for an equal anymore. He was looking for someone stronger, someone capable of finally giving him the death he'd spent centuries chasing. Before they could begin, the Coalition sprang its contingency plan, a swarm of Ragnars, mindless creatures bred specifically to be capable of killing Viltrumites, deployed as backup in case Battlebeast fell. Battlebeast wanted none of it. This victory, if it came, had to be his and Thragg's alone, so he turned and fought alongside Thraag to wipe out the Ragnars, ignoring Thraag calling him a fool for helping his own target survive. Nothing was going to steal this fight from him, but the Ragnars had left Thraag with an open wound across his stomach, and Battlebeast wouldn't accept a fight that wasn't fair. So he took his own greatsword and cut his own stomach open, matching the injury, evening the odds by choice. For a moment, Thraag seemed almost impressed by the sheer commitment, then annoyed, accusing him of treating all this like some kind of game. Battlebeast's answer was immediate. This isn't a game. This is what he lives for. This is his whole life. What followed was one of the most brutal one-on-one fights in the galaxy's history, an all-out war between two apex predators that stretched across days without pause. The advantage swung back and forth constantly. One stretch, Thraag was dominating. The next, Battlebeast had his skull nearly crushed between his own teeth. Thraag lost an eye in the exchange. And through it all, Battlebeast fought like a man finally getting to live. Because for him, this fight had everything. A worthy opponent, no shortcuts, no unfair advantage, and the very real chance that it would finally end him. It's worth remembering what this fight actually says about Thraag too. This is a being who no-sold hits from a post-conquest Invincible, whose durability was strong enough to shatter Dinosaurus' teeth and claws on contact, and who ultimately had to be dragged into the sun just to be permanently put down. And Battlebeast hurt him badly enough over days that by the time Thragg finally won, he immediately collapsed into a coma, requiring urgent medical attention. Before the fight even started, Thragg had actually respected him enough to offer him a place as an ally, a gesture Thragg, who treats nearly everyone else as disposable, extended to virtually no one else in the galaxy. In the end, Thragg won by exploiting the one wound Battlebeast had given himself, tearing further into the already open stomach, pulling him apart from the inside, and finally crushing his heart. Battlebeast's last act was to thank him. He'd gotten exactly what he'd spent his entire existence looking for, a death earned from an opponent who was actually stronger than him. Thragg skinned him afterward and wore his hide as part of his ceremonial garb, not as a trophy of dominance, but as a permanent reminder. A reminder that his own position as the strongest being in the galaxy had never been guaranteed, and that a single leonine warrior, holding nothing back and refusing every unfair advantage, had come closer to killing him than almost anyone else alive. But the story doesn't end there. The same curse that had built Thokk into what he was didn't simply vanish with him, it passed on to his bloodline, resurfacing in his daughter. She inherited his strength, his endurance, and that same bottomless rage, and like her father before her, she used it to liberate an entire world from war and forge her own utopia. But also like her father, the rage never stayed quiet. It eventually turned inward, hurting the very people she'd saved, and she exiled herself rather than let it consume her home the way it nearly consumed his. It was around this time that she learned the truth about how her father had really died and who was responsible. And so she made her own vow to hunt down and kill every last Viltrumite in the galaxy until either they were gone or she was. The curse of Battlebeast, it turns out, was never really about one warrior looking for his end. It was a cycle, and the galaxy hadn't seen the last of it yet.